up, everyone? This is Lyle.
And this is Jesse.
And we're the Hughes Brothers. So, last week we talked about knowing who God is and trusting in Him. We also talked about trusting in God and not leaning on our own strength. And we showed the example with trust falls. And when I leaned on my own strength, I fell down. Also in Matthew 14, we saw how when Peter was looking at Christ, he could walk on water. And when he was looking at the storm, he started falling and drowning in the water.
So today we're going to look at some of God's Word, and then we're going to see what the importance of it is in our lives. So let's begin.
Okay, so we're going to start today's lesson off with another word. Today's word is believe. When we believe something, we're accepting that something to be true. So, like last week, we talked about knowing who God is. We can trust in who God is because of the things that He said. But do we actually believe in who God says and who He is and what His Word says? Do we accept these things to be true? Now, in John 3:16, it says, "For God so loved the world that whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life." This is a common verse that is used a lot, but so important. It's important to see that for God so loved the world. Does He love everything in the world? No. God doesn't like the sin, the heartache, all these hard things that go on, because He didn't create that. He created a perfect world, and then when Adam and Eve sinned, that's when sin entered. But the verse goes on to say, whoever believes in Him, and God has made it clear in His Word who He is. Whoever believes in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. And it's important that me, Jesse, your parents, people of the church, we can talk about who God is. We can tell you Bible stories, but we can't be the people to make you believe. Only you can make that decision. And to get to that point, it's important to be in God's Word, to be seeing who He says that He is. And what does He say about Himself? What does His Word say about who He is? So, we're going to look at that a little bit more today. It's verse time. Where's Jesse? Jesse,
I'm here. Okay, so our verse today is Psalms 119:11. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee. So, we're going to look into that verse, and Lyle will start.
We're going to start at the end of the verse. That I might not sin against thee. This thee is talking about God. And if we look at this word, sin. What is sin? Sin is anything I do, anything I say, anything I think that goes against what God has commanded me. Now, we may think that we're pretty good. I don't steal. I don't lie. You can fill in the blank. But the Bible clearly says that we are all sinners. In Romans 3:23, it says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." It says we are all sinners. And the important thing of this verse is that I might not. So Jesse's going to talk about what thy word does. But we need to make sure that we know sin. We all have it. And we need to be aware of it. And we need to be conscious about it. And we need to think, what has God commanded me to do with my life?
Alright, so now we're going to look at the first part of the verse. Thy word have I hid in my heart. So I'm going to focus right now on what it means to hide in my heart. Do you guys ever hide something that's special to you that you don't want to lose or you want to keep safe? So that's kind of what we want to do here. We want to, thy word, so the Bible, we want to hide in our heart so that we can keep it safe, and that when we need, we can remember what God says in His Word. And that way it can comfort us, it can help us in trying times. Whenever we need help, we can just look to God's Word.
Now, what he's not meaning is I cut Jesse up and I put the actual Bible into Jesse.
No.
What does thy word have I hid in my heart? What does it actually mean?
It means to memorize verses. And that way we can remember them. So, if you guys remembered last week, we made motions to remember the verse. So, this week, we're going to do the same thing. And here we go. 119:11. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee.
So, let's do it together. Psalms 119:11. Thy word have I hid in my heart, that I might not sin against thee.
Okay, so now we actually get to dive into our story time. Now we get to think about Psalms 119:11, where it says, thy word have I hid in my heart so I might not sin against thee. It's important to think about, are we in God's word? What are the foundations that we're setting? The word I just said might be a clue to what I'm going to read. So if you will open up to Matthew 7, we are going to start in verse 24. So let's begin. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts on them may be compared to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against the house, and yet it did not fall, for it had been founded on the rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and slammed against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. When Jesus had finished these words, the crowds were amazed at his teachings, for he was teaching them as one having authority, and not as their scribes. As we look into Matthew 7, it's important to see there's two people. We have a wise man and a foolish man. The same circumstances came to both these men. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and slammed against the house. Yet, there were two different outcomes. Both of them had the choice to hear God's word. The wise man listened to it and acted on it. And that's the same for us. When we read God's word, when we read Psalms 119:11, are we thinking, thy word, I really want thy word to be in my heart so I might not sin against thee? Or are we just like a foolish man that goes, those are cool words. That's great. And just goes on living the life that they want. God commands us with so much greater authority, and it's important to look at that. Because this foolish man, he heard it, yet he didn't act on it, and he built his house on the sand, built the thing on the earth, and it came all crashing down. So I'm going to do a little visualization for us so that we can get this picture. So as you can see, I have two houses. They are identical. Now, I didn't have sand. I didn't have time to go to the beach. But I got some beads, which are like sand, these foam beads. And they're very foam moving. So you can see with this house, as it's in our sand, it's just sitting there. And if I put pressure on it, it sinks into the sand. Now, if I put pressure on this house on the rock, it's not moving. It's not going anywhere. Now, say earthquake, big wind, something comes. Everything's moving. Oh, my house just destroyed and I just made a mess. Now, if I put pressure on this rock, there's going to be wear. I'm putting the same amount of pressure, but the rock is taking the brute force. Where this house did not have any firm foundation. It was rocking, it was moving, and it just everything kept going crazy. So as we can see from our example, it's important to think about, what are we building our lives on? What does the sand represent that the foolish man built his house on? The house can represent our lives. What is the sand? Sand could be money. It could be pride. It could be in our abilities. Maybe that's a question that we need to ask. Now, the rock. What is the rock? That foundation. And that's a question that we need to talk through. And may I suggest, the rock is God. The rock is His Word. The rock is actually knowing the truth. And it's believing that it is true. Remember our word believe? It's accepting what we know as true. And so we need to look at God's Word and see, who does He say He is? And do we actually believe this? So we have the sand, and we have the rock. And the last question that we should ask ourselves is, most of the time, do we act like the foolish man, or do we act like the wise man and see God's Word and actually live it out day by day? Or do we, put our house on the sand, and when something hits, our house is destroyed? Or are we resting on God, on His Word, where when things hit us, we're able to stand firm?
Okay, so what did we learn today?
I don't know. What did we learn?
We learned how to hide.
Well, Jesse, we learned how to hide, but we hide God's Word in our hearts.
Oh, that's right. Because Psalms 119:11 says, "Thy word have I hidden in my heart, that I might not sin against thee."
We also learned about the word believe. And believing in something is accepting that something to be true. So we can know who God is. We can trust in God. But do we believe in God? Do we believe in His Word? Do we believe that we're sinners? And those are important things that we need to work through. Also, we looked at Matthew 7, where it talks about the wise man and the foolish man. The wise man built his house on the rock. The foolish man built his house on the sand. Who are we? Are we the wise man, or are we the foolish man? Do we build ourselves on the rock, on God, on who He says? Or do we build ourselves on things of this world? So that is the challenge this week, to be in His Word and think, what does this mean? What is God trying to say to me in His Word? So, as always, I'm Lyle.
And I'm Jesse.
And we're the Hughes Brothers.